He looked at me and he said, Dr. Zacharias, he said, we have tried to run our country our way. We have failed. It is time now for us to try and run it God's way.
What is the relationship between the political process and religion? We've all seen examples when some have used religious ideas to control. But does that mean the church should be banned from policy discussions? Hear the answer to that question today on Just Thinking with author and apologist Ravi Zacharias. Welcome to another Friday Q&A on Just Thinking, where today we return once again to the University of Waterloo in Canada. Over a 2-night stretch, Ravi took questions from students and faculty, and we've been listening to those events over the last few Fridays. In today's broadcast, we'll hear 2 related questions on something that has become a hot topic in today's climate, the church and the state. Here's the first question.
I wanted to say that I really agree with the idea that privatization severs a person and reduces meaning, what you had said. But I was wondering, I think that there are complications in terms of how religion or belief works itself out in terms of policy and politics, like state and church type debates, especially taking in the history of how religion in the past has sort of been used as a means of control or oppression and various other judgments and stuff like that. And still we see that today in different realms. I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
I'll do my best. Thanks. I think I follow what you're saying.
Okay.
Religion has not had an uncheckered past. Mm-hmm. And that's true of almost every major religion. Not all of them. Some of them have never imposed it in a sense of a moral law or something like that. But Christendom has had its tragic past. Same with, I think Islam has had it, Hinduism has had it. All of these major religions have had that kind of a checkered past. But you have to be sure of one thing. You never ever judge a worldview by its abuse. Mm-hmm. You always have to judge it by its assertions and its affirmations. When Jesus was in this world, it is very interesting that the disciples who followed him had one desire of him. Number one, that he would take control of the politics. They wanted to make him king. And what is so fascinating about the Lord Jesus is he said, my kingdom is not of this world. He said, otherwise my servants would fight. He said, my kingdom is from another place. And then when he told them of the manner of death he was going to die on the cross, they were outraged because the cross was the most heinous kind of torture inflicted. How dehumanizing. I have actually had Islamic scholars say to me across the table, how can you believe that your God was dehumanized like this and so embarrassed by a handful of people and so on. So the disciples had the same reaction and said, this is not the way you're going to die. And Jesus looked at them and said, you are not minding the things of God. The interesting thing is, Jesus never came to impose a political infrastructure upon a society. He came to change the hearts and minds of men and women who then in turn could change their society. The salt and light work at an inner level. My belief in this is to impose a carte blanche, a kingdom ethic on a society is not only impractical, it may not be even something God has ever asked us to do, because love for God comes from free will, not from imposition. Mm-hmm. But I do believe this, that young men and women today should learn to do their philosophical and theological homework and move within society in professorships, in places of government, and in places where culture is molded and shaped, and have a voice of reason in there. And then in the open marketplace of ideas, hopefully the voice of reason will triumph, either by showing how it works or by showing how it doesn't work when it fails to be applied. Now, Christ never formulated that political structure in his time. He just told them to go into the world and preach the gospel and to make disciples of all people. When God changes your heart and God changes my heart, we also become gracious to the other person who doesn't agree with us, and we cannot legislate all of morality. I think some non-negotiables. For example, I know Canada and the U.S. have all these points of tension going on these days, and it troubles me because I'm from both parts of the country, the world here. My wife's from Canada. I'm a Canadian citizen. I live in the United States. And when I studied the documents of the founding of the United States, they're fabulous, fascinating documents. And much of these truths is also partially true in Canada. The reason it was called the Dominion of Canada is because it was taken from the Psalms. His dominion shall be from sea to sea. Now, in the United States, when some truths are self-evident that all men are created equal, and words like sacred honor, words like providence, and all these words are found in the nature and the God of nature, there was a Judeo-Christian worldview. I don't think I'm saying anything volatile when I say this, although it may be seen as volatile. A pantheistic worldview would never have brought a country like this into being. I don't think this is also wrong, and I've talked to Islamic scholars and asked them this question. Do you think Islam would have brought a nation like Canada, the United States into being? No. So then what is the worldview that brought these nations into being? Somewhere there was that Judeo-Christian framework and that tradition. I'm not saying they are Christian nations. I'm saying there was a scaffolding of a Judeo-Christian worldview. And that's why I think it is something that needs to be preserved. This nation and the United States are two very special nations, as the United Kingdom. They have a great responsibility to the world, and I hope the Judeo-Christian scaffolding can hold true. That's my answer to you. Yes, sir.
Yes. My question is related to the previous question in some sense. I would like to ask you about the separation between church and state.
Right.
More specifically, if you could maybe expand and try to define what is meant by that, and whether you agree or disagree with this idea. And also referencing to some of the things that you mentioned in your talk, the lady who banned Christmas tunes from school, which I also agree is kind of, it just doesn't make sense to me. And also I've heard on the news that one of the judges to be on the U.S. Supreme Court is one of those who doesn't believe that there should be separation between church and state. So,
okay, thanks. Appreciate that. I was invited to speak in the home of Enver Hoxha, the big strong man of Albania. And this, what I'm saying to you is a preamble to my answer to you. And Hoxha, of course, mandated atheism, and Albania was known as the most atheistic country in the world. I lectured to a packed university audience, and it was fabulous to see the students respond. I was picked up then by a member of parliament who had me impromptu come and speak to the entire member of parliament there, which I did, and then went and met the new president, who was a cardiologist. We were in his home. He's a tall gentleman. He looked at me and he said, Dr. Zacharias, he said, we have tried to run our country our way. We have failed. It is time now for us to try and run it God's way. This is a man from the most atheistic country in the world telling us that face to face. When you look at the practical dogma of the separation of church and state, which is completely misrepresented now, and that dogma, as you know, is not in Canada. It is a doctrine distinctively in the United States. That proviso was made to keep the state from interfering with the church. That's one of the reasons your giving of the funds is also tax deductible, because they said the state was not sovereign. It did not own all of your money. You were allowed to give as much of your money as you wanted to charitable causes and so on. Now, what has happened is that it has been interpreted now to mean that the state can never represent one religion. That's what it is being interpreted to mean. So that if a person is asked to pray, or if a person is given a chaplaincy to the Senate and so on, they are more and more balking at the idea that this ought not to be a Christian, this ought to be any number of faiths that we have and so on. And as a result, the doctrine of separation of church and state has been completely lost in the shuffle of what it originally meant. Now, does the reverse hold true? Does that mean that the church has a right to dictate to the state? The answer is no. The church has a right as Christians to voice its opinion to the state and ought not to be barred from the public arena of debate. And to voice its opinion, they are equally entitled to that. Then let the electorate decide on the issues that comes in a democracy or a republic. You have this kind of opportunity for the individual to express himself or herself. Now, here's what I want to say to you on this. Harvard University was formulated and founded by Christians. Veritas is the motto, Christo e Ecclesia. Oxford University, the Lord is my light, is the motto. Princeton, Yale, they were all founded by Christians. It is so interesting that once the liberal theologians came into that place, the conservative ones were evicted and not even given a voice. This is a fascinating thing for the liberal who's supposed to be the cosmic vacuum cleaner that sucks in everything type thing. They reject the views of those who are different. I went to a conservative seminary and I studied a lot of liberals. You go to liberal seminaries, some of them have never even heard of who the conservative theologians are. In the doctrine of separation of church and state, it was to keep religion that which a person wished to practice so long as it did not violate the law of the land. Now it has actually come to mean that the church has no say to the state in any way, shape, size, or form. And we are blocked out from the arena of public discourse and public debate. The surest way for a person to lose the election today is to stand up there and say, I believe in Jesus Christ, and then watch it hit the fan.